Welcome to 1 Minute Recess, Nevada politics served with the strengths of a shot of caffeine, a dash of sarcasm, and zero fluff. My name's Annette Magnus, and I'm with Maria Teresa Lieberman and our dear friend Steve Sebelius. So, Maria, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Annette. Hi, Steve, and hi, everyone. We are here today on Monday, September 1st. We usually record on a Sunday, but it is Labor Day, so happy belated Labor Day when everyone hears this or sees this. So let's dive right in and let's burn through the BS all the way from Nevada to nationwide. There's a lot going on. So, Annette, what's going on with the recess rundown? That's back, but we don't have a session anymore. What's the deal with our state legislators and people?
We haven't been able to catch up with Steve since we were locked in the Nevada Legislative Building together until the wee hours of the morning. So, Steve, last week I gave my hot takes on the end of the Nevada legislature. Now it's time for you to give yours. We were in the thick of it the last time we talked. We were talking about, will the film tax pass? Will it die? What will get out? What will the governor veto? What will he sign? Will anything get done at all? And now we know the answers to all those questions. So what do you think about the end of the legislature and what got through and what didn't?
Yeah, I only wish that I had had my phone out and ready when Annette came to the press room. Right, I think either right immediately after or during the Ira Hansen filibuster, and just to capture the look of joy on her face as the building went up in total flame. It was
kept warm over it.
Yes, yeah,
It was like warm
exactly.
in my hands.
Breaking out the s'mores, and it was just kind of a disaster, and it was really unforced disaster because there was a change brought at the last second for something so insider that probably like maybe 0.5% of even insiders care about the membership of the Legislative Commission that oversees regulations during the interim time. There was a membership change that gave the Democrats an advantage. It was brought by Nicole Cannizzaro. The Republicans objected to it. They objected to the procedures. Poor Stavros Anthony got locked out of the Senate chamber, couldn't get back in. It was a disaster. And Ira Hansen, much to the delight of many of the lobbyists in the lobbyist room, just filibustered for about 15 of the most precious minutes that the legislature has, and that's at the very end when a lot of bills were waiting to be heard, to get through. The film tax credit, I think, Annette, you mentioned that. I don't think that was one of the ones that was ready to pass because I don't think the votes were there for it. I don't know if they're there now, but I keep hearing that is going to be on a special session agenda. I will say this, if it appears on the special session agenda, the votes are there because a special session, unlike a regular session, is pretty choreographed. And everybody knows what's going to happen. And you don't put something on the special agenda if you don't know it's actually going to pass, because that would be embarrassing to the person who calls the session, the governor, and the people who attend the session.
On that, Steve, because chaos, what reigned supreme the last week of session, and normally the end of session's fairly cooked as well. But we were seeing bills, some of them that I was working on, getting put up that were getting voted on 4 or 5 times and getting voted down.
Yeah, no,
and they were the speaker's bills.
Yeah,
so
absolutely right.
Is there a guarantee with the caucus?
The speaker lost a number of bills that he really wanted, including, and I think this is the one you're referring to, Annette, the payments bank bill, because God forbid there be some kind of payment where the bank doesn't get a taste. And so that bill failed. It was brought back in a slightly different form to avoid a 2/3 vote. It failed again. That was embarrassing for the speaker, because normally the speaker knows what's going to pass and what's not going to pass, and doesn't put something out there that isn't going to have the votes in his own caucus. I mean, these are Democrats this is Democrat on Democrat violence killing a speaker's bills. That was something unusual in this session, and that is not something I dare say that would have happened to a speaker, Barbara Buckley. I never saw that happen even to any of the other speakers, Frierson, Kirkpatrick. You know where the votes are, but then again, let's just be honest about this, and that is that Yeager had a caucus that Buckley never had to deal with, Perkins never had to deal with, Frierson, Kirkpatrick, Oseguera. None of these people ever had to deal with the caucus that we have now, and they have shown themselves to be somewhat obstreperous about how they go about things. So that's something that you got to give credit, a little bit of credit to Yeager, who kind of rolled the dice and found out that if you want to roll the dice, go up the street to the casinos. Do not do it in the legislative building.
It was one of the most exciting nights I've ever been a part of. That's for sure. The end was quite something this time.
If
What
only
are
I
some
had
other
the
bills that?
picture. An
Oh,
epic. It would have been an epic picture of Annette with her Stanley Cup, just like her eyes wide with joy. It like almost like on Christmas morning, opening up a present that she really, really, really wanted.
I told Maria I was sitting in the assembly chamber with one phone to my ear, watching on another phone Ira Hansen filibuster while we're sitting there watching the assembly, not knowing what's happening in the Senate. It was amazing.
It really was, and I've seen like a lack of coordination between the houses before. I mean, I've seen the Senate, in session trying to pass bills after Speaker Buckley dismissed the assembly sine die, and they're leaving the building, and someone came to the Senate chamber and said, "You guys ought to know the assembly is leaving. So whatever you pass is not going to pass because there are no more assembly members to pass the bill." I've seen that, but that filibuster, that last minute filibuster, was something else. It was something really to behold.
What do you make of the end of session? Actually, all of session, really. There were a lot of conversations in the hall while I was up there lobbying and just amongst friends and colleagues that this was the worst run session they had ever seen, meaning logistically, right? Conversations were not being had between the houses, between the governor's office, or maybe you would see Senate Majority Leader Cannizzaro making deals with the governor, but not including Speaker Yeager. It just didn't seem like there was a whole lot of coordinating going on. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think you did see that. I think that's a fair criticism. I think you did see that. You saw it with things like Reba's Law, which basically was allowed to die on a Friday afternoon. And after outrage from the animal community, they had to bring that back on Monday through a special agreement between the speaker and the majority leader to resurrect that bill right around Easter time. I've always been amazed that there isn't more coordination, despite the political differences between the governor and the leaders of the legislature, to basically say, listen, here's what we've got going on. Here's some bills that are coming up. What do you think of them? Is this something that you're going to support? And if it's not something that the governor would support, you find if there's a way that you can get some of it through, you try to do that. But if there's no way that the bill is going to pass, then you're just wasting time or creating a political campaign mailer for the next election. And then we saw some of those bills. Some of those bills passed in the exact same form as were vetoed in 2023. And you might as well have just taken some liquid paper and changed the date and the bill number at the top. And Lombardo might as well just have taken some liquid paper and changed the date of his veto message at the top and sent the same thing over again. That was not surprising. What was surprising to me a little bit was when lawmakers did what I've always advocated doing, which is, okay, the governor vetoed this bill last time because he said, for example, the penalties for fake electors were too harsh in the previous bill. It was harsher than you would get for dealing fentanyl. Okay, so the bill author said, all right, I will lower this from a B felony down to like a D felony, and to answer the governor's objection. And it still gets vetoed because the governor says, well, this might criminalize legitimate political protest. I mean, Annette, you've been involved in a number of political protests, you and Maria both. I don't know that I've ever seen you at a political protest sign fake documents that you then send to the National Archives. If you did that at some protest, I must have missed it because mostly I see a lot of bullhorns and signs, maybe even a chicken costume, but no fake documents. So that veto message really kind of doesn't hold. And I think really it's just the governor didn't want that bill. And so no matter what Skip Daly did to change it, it was not going to get signed under a Republican governor. So I thought that was kind of unfortunate because the whole thing is, We saw when Ivana Cancela was there and she had a bill that was vetoed by Governor Sandoval. She worked with him to modify that bill and get it into a form where he would sign it. And he did. And they worked together. And that was an example of the legislature working. And I've always considered that to be the way it should be. And sometimes that didn't come through this time. But to your point, and that the lack of coordination, I think we're seeing that. I think we're seeing maybe some bad blood between the houses, people that just don't like each other, ambitions getting in the way. We know Nicole Cannizzaro had her eye on the running for attorney general the whole time, and as I mentioned, we had this obstreperous assembly caucus that Steve Yeager had to deal with people bringing bills and doing things that were not helpful, and we're definitely not going to pass. And so all of those factors, I think created some problems. But there's always the flow to the session. It starts. There's a lot of time wasted. There's a lot of taking Friday off. There's some snow days because we insist that the legislature only meet in Carson City. And notwithstanding the fact that you could make a couple of little changes to the Constitution and allow the legislature to meet in a place where planes can land, where people don't have to trudge through snow to get to the legislative building and all of that, we insist on meeting in Carson City. And so as a result, you've got that delay at the beginning. And then at the end, they realize, oh my God, here comes deadline. We got to finish this. We got to get these things done. And you have these hearings, the way these hearings are done with the authors of bills. If you're presenting a bill, you can talk for as long as you want. But if you come to oppose a bill, you have 2 minutes. And that is fairly strictly enforced, that 2-minute limit. And, we all know that there are people who call in and speak, and we're very glad they enforce the 2-minute limit. But others, are making good points, and right in the middle of their good points, their 2 minutes is up and they have to stop. So there's definitely some problems with how the legislature is structured, how it was run this time. I don't know why, there isn't some kind of back time calendar other than the deadlines in the 120-day calendar, some kind of back time calendar where the leaders know we've got to get this done by this date, regardless of what the 120-day calendar says, so we can process this legislation and have time to deal with the other house and with the governor before it's a rush to the end. I have never seen a session where there wasn't a clamor at the deadline, and more sessions than not have special sessions afterwards just to deal with the fallout.
Sounds like another episode of Succession, Desert Edition. I have a question on that, but first, because in case there are people of a certain age who may have heard liquid paper and said, what? What's liquid paper to all the kids out there, Steve?
Yeah. Hold on here. Liquid paper is a correction fluid that you use. You shake up the bottle, and then you take out this little dropper here, and then you wipe away the air on your piece of paper, and then you write.
Wait, does that mean you manually have to write something out though, with like a pen or a pencil?
With a pen, with a pen on the old school tablet, which I use for everything. And I think after this week, what we saw in Carson City with the computers crashing, I think, having an old school reporter's notebook that never crashes is the way to go. I'm firm in my choice on that. And
listen, I got my own right here, mushrooms and all.
That's yes. I don't. Is that a dream journal? I don't know what's.
No, it's my work journal. But thank you.
But I tell you, I like it better because I've talked to people who take notes on their phone, and it just doesn't seem like they're listening to you. It seems like they're texting their friend, and they're taking notes. They're listening to what you're saying, and they're taking notes. I just can't do that. I just can't do it. I take notes on paper, and I do occasionally use liquid paper to do it. It's you can still find it at the stores. It's in the stores. You can go, and like Staples has it. So so for all of you really, really young people, that's what liquid paper is and was.
Thank you so much, Steve. I was worried about the kids. And now back to Succession. Old season is over, session is over, and now the new Succession Desert Edition is all about the leadership battle, as for what Annette said last week. How do you think it's going to shape out? What do you think of the upcoming season of Succession? Who's the Logan Roy? Who's the Shiv? Who's who? What's happening? What do you think?
Now I'm gonna answer this question, but confess that I have never seen Succession, so I'm going blind. But I'm familiar with the concept. I know what the basic plot line of that story is. I would volunteer to be Speaker of the Assembly. I don't know if it's like the House of Representatives where the House can choose a speaker, and the speaker does not have to be necessarily a member of the House. So
Let's do it.
I don't think it's ever been done in the history of the House, and certainly not in the history of the legislature. But yeah, you had a major revelation when both the speaker and the majority leader, the person next in line to be speaker, both said, "Peace out. I've had enough. We're not going to do this. We're going to run for something else, or we're going to sit it out, or we're going to do whatever." Go on vacation. I do not blame them, by the way. I don't blame them one bit. And both Speaker Yeager and Majority Leader Sandra Hauge have chosen excellent vacation destinations. So good for them. But now who's going to lead the legislature? And, in the old days, before term limits and before the 120-day limit on the session and all those kind of things, leadership was different. You really were groomed. When you were a freshman, and you were supposed to be seen and not heard. Now, with 12-year limits, people climb that ladder a lot more quickly than they otherwise would have. And in some cases, more quickly than they probably should, because it takes time to understand how the process works, to be a good committee chair and to be in leadership, because you have to know what everybody in your caucus wants. You have to know how to help them. You have to balance the politics and the policy. And it's a very difficult job, especially with 42 people, all of whom who think they should be governor, and are impatient to get across the courtyard to the governor's office. And so it's difficult to manage that kind of thing. I've heard different things about the next potential speaker. I've heard Howard Watts wants to be speaker, notwithstanding some problems he's run into with organized labor. I've heard that Elaine Marzola wants to be speaker. I believe she represents my assembly district, so I wouldn't mind having a speaker of the assembly representing me. And yes, I will be making some constituent calls to her about the traffic lights down the street here. I've been unsuccessful with the city of Henderson, so maybe we have to pull rank and get the Speaker of the Assembly involved.
Call your county commissioner. He'll go further.
Yeah, that's true. The county commissioner. I think this is a city road, though, so I don't know
if you whine enough, I find you get what you want.
In fact, I'm just going to text you, Annette, and then have you talk to the county commissioner on my behalf. And so, but as they rise up, then you have new people who are there. And I think all of us who've been up there, we've seen people who come up there, and some of them are really good right off the bat. And you're saying, okay, this person is going to go somewhere. And some of them are really, really bad right off the bat. And you say, this person's either going to learn to sink or swim. And many of them sink and never really, achieve a higher purpose. And so I think, it really depends on why you're going there. And a lot of people go there for the wrong reasons. A lot of people go there and say, well, I'm not really a politician. Well, yes, you are. When you put your name on a ballot, you're a politician. And you shouldn't hide from that. You should embrace that. And if you're hiding from it, it just tells me that, you're posing, you're pretending you don't like it up there. You're just going up there, trudging to do your duty and whatnot. Give me a break. Nobody endures what you have to endure to get to the assembly who doesn't want to be there in some form or fashion. So I think that's kind of a joke when I hear people say, "Oh, I'm not a politician." I always laugh and tell them, if your name's on a ballot, you are a politician.
What do you make of the whole? I talked about this last week. I have pretty strong feelings about everything, but I particularly have strong feelings about the fact about these folks who run and then they get up there and they whine the entire time, these legislators, and they're like, this is so hard. It's such a sacrifice. What do you make of that?
I just say, you know what? Suck it up, Buttercup. You asked for this. This is something you asked for. And if you ask for it not knowing what the job entails, that's on you. I've been up there. I've been going up there since 2001. And so I've seen, all sorts of sessions, good, bad, and ugly. I know what's involved in the job. People ask me all the time if I'd ever want to run. And I usually say no. And part of the reason is because it is incredibly hard work, especially compressed into that 4 months time. You're away from home. You have to balance, depending on what committees you're on, you have to balance an incredible amount of information. And you're not only moving your own bills, you're hearing other people's bills. And if you're really good, if you're like an Elliot Anderson, you're reading every bill that comes before your committee. Now, I think he's the exception rather than the rule. But it's still a matter of, having to master a whole bunch of stuff in a short period of time. And so it is not easy. And I have respect for anybody, by the way, who puts their name on a ballot, even the ones who claim they're not politicians. I have respect for that because it's hard work. And you're putting yourself out there, you're subjecting yourself to all sorts of attacks and the vagaries of politics. And so I think everybody who does that deserves at some levels of respect. But yeah, don't go up there and then start complaining right away. I mean, this is what you asked for, and you got what you asked for, and now it's time to do the job and suck it up.
Buttercup. And so one of the things that we also talked about, and I liked what you mentioned, is that a lot of people move up the ladder either just naturally or because they want to very quickly and kind of don't take the time and don't understand the things. And also, in a way, not just feel like the more people get more responsibility as well in that building, then all of a sudden it's like adding on of now it's extra hard for me. So if there are people out there that would like to be legislators or are legislators and would like to climb the ladder, what types of life tips, life hacks of sucking it up, Buttercup, would you give? Because it also seems like when the ladder is being climbed, they're like, oh my God, now I have this responsibility and I can't do this anymore. And it's like, well, you can decide to not climb the next rung of the ladder.
Yeah. Well, it's been my personal experience that longevity is probably the worst basis for determining leadership. I've had bosses who became bosses because they just managed to not get fired, and they were not good. They were not good, and everybody knew it. It was just that person managed to outlast everybody else and didn't really appreciate the job. And so I think the first thing I would say is you want to be curious. You want to be a curious person, to be curious about how things work and why they work and why they don't work. You want to go into with an attitude of, how can we fix this? Not a political attitude, like how can we fix this while also giving us the maximum advantage in the next election, although that's always helpful to have that, but legitimately wanting to fix it. So somebody who encounters a problem and then thinks about, okay, this person has a problem. I know I'm going to have to get this past Republicans and Democrats and get it signed by a Republican governor. They don't want to do X, Y, and Z. The Democrats that are bringing this to me don't want to do A, B, and C. So how do we find a way through that thicket and make it all work? And I think the people who are able to do that and kind of envision the entire playing field are going to be more successful than the people who just see things through a partisan lens. We all know people who are up there who in every committee meeting ask partisan questions that betray the fact that they haven't been listening to the hearing at all. I rewatched a hearing last night on a bill, and I saw this happening in real time. And listen, I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I could follow what was going on, and it was on a complex subject. And I feel like if I can follow it, then somebody who got elected to office ought to be able to follow it and not ask a question that was written probably, weeks before and handed to them. And that's the other thing. I would like to get back to the days where this whole idea of a caucus vote is a thing of the past, where caucus leaders come and say, this is a caucus vote and you have to vote with us as a caucus so we all stick together.
Hell, at this point, I just like the caucuses to have conversations before they vote so that they know what they're voting on.
But
I mean, we're at that level.
if the speaker or the majority leader came to me and told me, and I was a member of the assembly, and they told me, well, you need to vote this way, I would tell them what Dick Bryan said that he would say in the same situation. And that was, listen, I got elected the same as you, and I'll vote what I think is in the best interest of my constituents and what I think is in the best interest of the state. And if you're, if you don't like that, if you're gonna be mad about that, well, then I'm sorry, be mad about it. But that's the way it goes. I'll only vote for something that I think is right. And if you want to make me vote for this, then give me X, Y, and Z, and I'll vote for it. And so I think that would be good. But that, and also, kind of tempering your ambitions for a short time while you're there and focusing on the policy solutions, and I think a lot of times if you stay in close touch with your constituents and listen really to their problems, what they're going through, people telling you, listen, I'm having trouble putting food on the table. My paycheck doesn't go as far. Groceries are more expensive. Gas is more expensive. What can you do about that? And then figuring out, what can the state of Nevada do about that? Is there a way to lower gas prices? Is there a way to suspend maybe the gas tax like Governor Lombardo once proposed doing for a temporary period of time? Is there a way to, do something else that just kind of helps people out? I think that's probably, somebody who's going to be more successful is going to be focused on those types of things. And also, finally, I think the most important thing is to be honest with your constituents and tell them the truth, and say, instead, when you're running, don't say, I'm going to pass this bill, because you can't guarantee that. There's no way you can guarantee that. To pass a bill is an incredibly complex process, as Annette can tell you in great, great detail. It's not easy. The process is not designed to pass bills. It's designed to kill bills. And the few that are successful have had to make it through an incredible amount of hearings and amendments and machinations before they finally get to the governor's desk and get the governor's signature. So be honest with your constituents and say, listen, I'm going to do the best I can to pass this bill. I've been, the longer you're there, the more knowledge you get about how to actually do it, and say, I'll use everything I know and every relationship that I have to help get this bill passed. But I've got to convince, 28 of my fellow lawmakers to say yes to this. And then I've got to convince at least 13 senators to say yes to this. And then I've got to convince the governor to say yes to this. So I'll do everything I can to do that. But I can't guarantee you that that's going to happen. And anybody who says they can guarantee you that that's what's going to happen is lying. And I would tell constituents, if you want to be lied to, if you want to be told something pretty, there will be a line of people out the door and down the street who are willing to lie to you. But if you want somebody who's going to be honest with you, then vote for me. And I will at least pay you the respect of telling you this is the way that things work up there. And I'll do my best to get it through, but I can't guarantee it'll happen.
Speaking of that, so there's a whole new crop of candidates now starting to pop up through the woodworks, come out. I'm running for these open seats that, Steve Yeager's leaving behind, Sandra Haudegie's leaving behind, a few
Wait,
other
did you say you're running in there?
Yeah, no.
I was excited for a moment there.
That'd be a no. Went down that road. I'm good. So anyways, there's going to be a whole lot of new kind of movement, not just with the current caucus that exists, but like adding to that caucus, right? New legislators coming in, new freshman legislators, people moving from other districts to run in seats that they don't live in, things like that. What do you think that shakeup is going to do, especially to the assembly? Because I think that's where the majority of the shakeup's going to be. But you're also going to have really important races on the ballot in the Senate too, like Melanie Scheibel's district, which is relatively new to her since redistricting and things like that. So there's going to be a lot on the ballot, but there's also not going to be anything really earth shattering at the top of the ticket. Of course, we have the governor's race and we'll have the congressionals, but we don't have competitive Senate races. We don't have a presidential race. It feels a little bit like 2014 when there wasn't a whole lot on the Nevada ballot to really drive turnout and things went sideways. Let's talk
Yeah,
about that.
we all remember what happened in 2014.
The red wedding.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as you get newer people in there, you lose that experience. I keep track of this. I have a spreadsheet, and I keep track of how much knowledge and experience leaves the legislature and how much comes in. And frankly, I mean, just Yeager and Sandra Haggerty alone are 2 decades of experience. And say what you will about either one of them, their skills as a lawmaker. I happen to think they notwithstanding some of the things that happened this last session, that they're pretty good lawmakers. That's 20 years of knowing how a bill becomes a law for real, that is out the door. And it's also 20 years of possible mentorship where a freshman could come to this majority, a person who's been there a long time, and say, hey, how did you get that bill passed? Or what should I do? I'm running into a roadblock with this. That's gone. And as others leave with experience, that is going to be a problem going forward, I think, because you get a new person coming in, no matter how earnest, no matter how much they've studied up, the reality they experience is much different than what they imagine it to be. And it takes a couple of sessions before your imagination is solidified into the reality of what goes on. So that will be a problem. Yeah, I think Melanie Scheibel is in a district where there could be a potential challenge to her. There's really not, if you look at the map, there's really not a lot of competition in Nevada's Assembly and Senate districts. There's a few seats that are toss-up seats. Most of them are safe seats on both sides. And Republicans now, when they're almost even with their Democratic rivals, basically are saying, maybe we should redistrict now into a place where there's more equal Democratic and Republican representation. And so I think you're going to see a little bit of that. But I think with each person that leaves, that's experience that can't be replaced. And I to the life of me, I don't understand why when somebody like a Maggie Carlton is up there, where she's not like mobbed by people saying, Maggie, can I buy you lunch and tell you what I've got going on, and you can give me some advice, because that's she's the longest serving female lawmaker up there. She should be treated like a rock star.
There are a few legislators, I will say, who I worked for when their elections were happening, not during session, obviously, but there were some conversations just like that. Like, you need to get to know this person. She is the expert. One of the people who's mentored me, mentored Maria. I mean, just a wealth of information. It's like her and Chris G and Dina Titus. Like, those are the people you should be relying on for that kind of information. Jason Frierson, he was a lobbyist this time. Jason and Maggie were just roaming the halls this session, and people were not taking advantage of that. And it blows my mind, because there were a couple times while lobbying, I went to Maggie with how do I fix this?
Yeah.
And she came up with creative solutions on how to get around certain budget things and stuff. That is invaluable information, and I just don't get why some of these people don't tap into it.
Yeah, you can't buy that. I saw Maggie. We were at the airport and waiting for our flight, and of course it was Southwest, so it was delayed. So we had plenty of time to talk, and just that one conversation. I mean, she remembers things that most people have forgotten, and she has a great story, and it's like a roadmap. It's like somebody having a roadmap. And I think sometimes, and maybe it just seems this way to me because I'm old, but I think sometimes you have younger people who think they know how everything is, and they don't. And like Mark Twain once said, it's not the things that you know for sure that will kill you. It's the things that you think are true but that are not so. And so, that's you're going to have to learn a hard lesson that you might have avoided if you had just sought out that expertise. And like you say, it's right there. It's right there with these folks who were formerly lobbyists. Now they have
Right
interest.
there, sitting on the couch on the third floor,
Yeah. And now
literally just sitting there.
they might have interests before, they're representing groups, they're representing other groups. But you know what?
Talk to people.
They will give you the benefit of their knowledge. They will do it if you just ask. And so many people don't. And I think that's unfortunate. I think it's an untapped resource. Like I said before, all this knowledge and experience going out the door. Well, here's some that's come back in, not part of the body, but accessible to the body. And I would say not taking advantage of that is just a criminal waste of resources.
Okay, before I turn it over to talk to or have Maria talk about the great hacking of 2025, I just have one other question. You mentioned special. I feel like it's looming there, just like it's looming behind us, like it's going to sneak up and get us like the Grim Reaper. In November, I'm hearing. What do you think is on that agenda? And do you think it is absolutely necessary, considering, most of the governor's bills didn't get killed because of got killed because of Ira Hansen's filibuster, things like that?
Yeah. Now, is it absolutely necessary? No, it is not absolutely necessary, because we know that everything that the legislature had to get done constitutionally, got done. The budget was passed. It seems like the federal cuts that are going to be made aren't going to take effect until the next session. So that bloodletting will be for another day. So I don't think it's absolutely necessary. Now, would it be something that a lot of people want to have? Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the bills, the governor's crime bill, for example, that's definitely going to be on the agenda. We had another shooting on the Las Vegas Strip. That follows the Instagram influencer shooting in front of the Bellagio. Those kind of things can't happen. I mean, you already have what seems to me to be scores of people on social media saying Vegas is overpriced. Vegas, charges me, $50 to even look in the mini bar, much less buy anything from the mini bar. They won't do anything. They're not rolling out the red carpet. You can't eat for cheap like you used to. It's just not worth it to come. You pay for parking, you pay resort fees, you pay, they add automatic gratuity and then ask for a gratuity on top of the gratuity. What is going on here? And you already have that. And to have open violence, on the Strip, I think is something that the tourism authorities don't want. And so I think, they're going to pass that crime bill. Now, I've always said, well, yeah, but Las Vegas Boulevard is not the only street in Las Vegas. There's plenty of other streets where shootings are happening. And where's their crime relief? But a lot of folks, focus exclusively on the tourist corridor because that's, the engine that makes the city grow. Although the engine is sputtering a little bit now, if you look at some of the numbers. So I think that'll be on there for sure. I mentioned the film tax. If they get the votes, the film tax will probably be on there. And now I think this bill about cybersecurity, or some bill about cybersecurity, is going to be on there. If you go back and you look at
Gosh, I sure hope so.
yeah, if you go back and look at the hearing on Assembly Bill 432, you will see Tim Galuzzi, who's the chief information officer for the state, say things such as cybercrime is not some abstract threat anymore. It is very personal. Don't we know it? Make no mistake, we are a high value target. Yep, absolutely. Failing to have a integrated cybersecurity center is like leaving your digital front door open. I think somebody walked through that front door very recently. We went through a number of other cities that have had hugely disruptive attacks and had to pay millions, and finally said, if you don't have a central structure in place before the attack, it's already too late. You can't build the plane in flight. And
here's the thing, we also had already had like the MGM hack and the whole Strip get shut down. It's not like this is the first time like a thing in Nevada has experienced this. Isn't that brand new?
But I think even more to the point, as Tim outlined in this presentation on this bill, which, by the way, the hearing for that bill was in March, and that bill was referred to Ways and Means right before the deadline, where it died a slow death, um, were the attacks on other municipal governments, the ransomware of data, the export of data, the placing of the data on the dark web that resulted in lawsuits from citizens and even from the police union of Oakland, California against the city. All of those things were known to us in March. And what seemed to be a very reasonable bill from Toby Urick, who happens to be a Republican, what seemed to be a very reasonable bill did not pass. And some of the questions that were asked at that hearing were just absolutely ridiculous. And, some of it is just a lack of knowledge because, a lot of us don't know about cybercrime. A lot of us know, yeah, we should probably change our passwords and probably not use a common password and do all that kind of stuff and keep that up. But some of the questions were obviously partisan in nature and were attempting to do the Democrats' favorite thing, which is to link Lombardo to Donald Trump, which I think in almost about 98% of the cases is an inopposite comparison, and so I think that's just wasting time, and in fact wasting enough time that this bill didn't pass, and now we're in a situation where something is going to pass, and I think it'll be some version of what we could have had. Now, having said all that, would this bill have changed if we had passed this bill? Would we have been saved from this cyber attack? I don't think so. I think that this was an attack on the executive branch, which is already monitored by a central cybersecurity operation, and it was detected quickly and dealt with quickly, but not so quickly enough that some data didn't get out. And so I think it's probably too much to say if this bill had passed, this wouldn't have happened. But I think something is going to happen now because it just simply has to, because, and once again, we're reactive. Where we could have been proactive, we're reactive. And like many of the problems that beset
That's
governments,
the Nevada way. But that's the Nevada way.
well, it's not only the Nevada way, it's the American way. It's a failure of imagination to imagine what our enemies and what people who mean us harm might possibly do. And that failure of imagination comes back to bite us again and again.
Speaking of failure of the American way, the big beautiful bill obviously will start phasing in 2026. You alluded to that. Thinking about what's coming for the state of Nevada. And it's going to be bad. We know that interim finance can tap into the rainy day fund if they need to. In fact, our friend Maggie Carlton was the first person to do that during the pandemic. However, I have heard that it would be preferable to set some money aside for Medicaid and SNAP because we know those cuts are going to be coming and it's going to be brutal for Nevadans who need help the most. Do you think the Democrats use some of their leverage? A lot of this is going to be I was going to say Joe Biden. Ooh, Joe Lombardo's agenda. Do you think the Democrats use the leverage to get some of their agenda on the special session agenda?
I would hope so. I mean, why not? Why not? I mean, if you're going to call a special session and the governor's going to ask for his crime bill, you should ask for something in return. There's no such thing as a free lunch. I think on the issue of SNAP and Medicaid, I think all parties will agree. I think even the governor would agree that these are some of the most vulnerable people in Nevada. And that the option of just not filling these cuts, just letting these things happen, and the state doesn't really do anything about it, I think it is unacceptable. I think across the board, and I think Republicans and Democrats will agree on that. And so the question then is, how do you finance those? How do we backstop that until we can achieve a different policy at the federal level? And so I think everyone's going to agree on that. And that may be something that the Democrats ask for and basically say, we need to prepare for this because we can't let, people who are the most vulnerable people suffer because of these cuts that have gone through. And I know the Democrats will say, this was done to achieve Republican goal of giving tax cuts to billionaires and big corporations and all that. And there is some truth to that. That's, this bill, they were going through everything they could to find extra money to offset the costs, and it still raised the deficit by more than 3 trillion. So that's something that you can debate going forward and say, listen, that we should do this, we should do that. But I think everybody's going to come together and say, yeah, these cuts are not acceptable. We can't just let it go. And so the state will have to find funds to do what the federal government will not. And that's unfortunate because, other than the rainy day fund, which we took a lot of hard work to get it to where it is now, there's not a lot of money laying around Nevada for the taking. I mean, if these cyber hackers were hoping to, gain a bunch of cash, they hacked the wrong state. Sorry, you guys, you got to go to a rich state. We don't.
We were just gathering up the couch pennies, friend.
Right. That's our part of our budget
That's where
process.
our riches come from.
Is going through the car and the couch at home and getting, nickels and dimes. And if you find a quarter, it's a great day. Yeah. So that's something that we have to deal with. But it's unfortunate that this has to happen, and that coming down from the federal government almost entirely outside of our control. But I have to say, I think Joe Lombardo is probably just as concerned about it and just as displeased about it as the Democrats are, because this is not something that helps him politically, and it's not something that helps the state with vulnerable people who need help. We hear about people who are evading work requirements and all of that. We know that so many people who are on Medicaid are actually working, have jobs, and are actually working. And so it's just unfortunate that this all has to come down. But that's something that the legislature is going to have to deal with. And all these new people that we're talking about who are now going out and campaigning for these jobs and walking these districts in the desert heat in the summer, they're asking for the opportunity to go in there and work on and solve these issues. It is not going to be an easy session in 2027. In fact, the special session might not be that easy as well.
So speaking of the hack of our 1990 computers that I'm sure we have, where was the governor? I'm not totally plugged in. I remember that they found it, but data went out. But the other question is, ¿Dónde está Joe? Where was the governor? Which is interesting because, if it were the other party, probably the Republicans would be going crazy. Where was Sisolak, or why is he crying? So what was the whole deal with the governor, and what kind of input did he have in dealing with this?
Yeah, I think as the governor himself later acknowledged, this is the most serious crisis he has faced since he has been governor. And I also take him at his word that he has been involved in the response to this from the very beginning. You guys probably know this, the general public may not know this, but in addition to an undergraduate degree, he has a master's degree in UNLV in crisis management. And you saw that coming out during that news conference as he was describing the different phases of responding to a crisis. Now, whether or not that was helpful at that exact moment is not. The point was that in times of crisis, people want to see their elected officials. They want to see the governor. Now, would it have made a single bit of difference if the governor had canceled his trip through rural Nevada and the dedication of a Mormon temple, a meet and greet in Ely, other things like that, and been at that news conference on Wednesday to be the face of the response? No, I don't think it would have made a bit of difference. The governor said he wanted to put the technical people out there, and I agree with that. That's a good thing to do because the technical people are the ones who are actually on the ground responding. But having the governor there is something that reassures people that somebody is in charge, somebody is making sure that, this is going to be resolved as quickly as possible, and giving them solid information. And we know that he's capable of doing that because he did it after 1 October. There were vicious, terrible conspiracy theories that persist to this day that Lombardo shot down in those news conferences when he was sheriff of Clark County, and we experienced the worst mass shooting in the history of the United States of America. And he did a great job in that moment. And so I thought it was kind of an unforced error that he wasn't at that Wednesday news conference, knowing the importance of having him there doing that. And I think he understood that because in his comments at the Thursday news conference, which essentially was the same information that had been relayed on Wednesday up in northern Nevada, this one down here in southern Nevada, the major difference was just that Lombardo was there and reassuring people and saying, listen, I want to reassure people we are on this. We're doing the best we can. We're giving you as much information as we can. We can't tell you who did it. We don't know what their motive was, which was curious to me because in a ransomware attack, that it seems to me the motive is to gain a ransom. So but no demands have been made, or so they said. So it's curious as to what is actually going on. Was this a professional hack? Was this some kids at Black Hat who made a bet with each other and they were going to try to do this? What data was taken? Is it personally identifiable information? Where is that data now? And can the state get it back? What is the status of the state's computers? All of those things. Those are questions that I think you're going to see at future news conferences. And I think you will see the governor probably at every one of them because the importance of knowing that somebody is in charge. And even if it's just a rhetorical thing, even if it's just, hey, here's the governor, he's out there. He's not sitting at the keyboard typing to try to find who did this. He's not on the case anymore. He's not a police officer anymore, tracking down the bad guys, but he's there. He's there. He's in charge, and people are reassured by that. And I think he's aware of that now. Not being there that first day, I think, was probably a mistake, not a fatal mistake, but still something that he and I think his whole team probably should have realized, is not a good look.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
I think
Go ahead, Maria.
one thing that this kind of also reminds me of what you were mentioning of the bill, of the lack of imagination. You mentioned Black Hat. I now, having been to one of those conventions, one of the things that you learn in some of the trainings, and especially in the world of cybersecurity, is you have to think like the other would think. And there's the idea of the elevators and the little holes that are in the elevators. And now I know that there's little hole in the elevator, but a regular person just sees an elevator. It goes up and down. But someone, a hacker, sees a hole and says, how can I open this up? And apparently in New York, stash cocaine money in there. And so I think, that's just a testament to our state needs to start having a little bit of imagination. We can start by increasing revenue, so at least we have some money to.
Yeah, I mean, it really like responding to these kind of things and doing what they call a red cell team, which is a team within a government agency that looks for ways to attack and penetrate defenses. They do this in the military quite a bit. We have, for example, the Seal Beach Naval Weapons Depot, and they say, okay, if terrorists wanted to get the weapons stored in Seal Beach, how would they do it? So they hire a team of special operators, and that team comes up with a way to do it. They don't tell the people at the base when it's going to happen or how. And then that team comes in on a particular date and time and penetrates the security. And I've talked to people who do that for a living, and it is shockingly easy to be able to do that, to bypass security, to get past all of what we think are impenetrable defenses. It just takes some imagination, and it takes somebody on the other side thinking, how can we get around this stuff? How can we cause problems? Before 9/11, none of us ever thought a hijacking would turn an airplane into a weapon. Now we all know that. Now there's cockpit doors and now additional gates in front of the cockpit doors. So we know that now, but we fix that after we experience the problem. So the trick is to figure out how they're going to get in, what mischief they're going to cause before the problem occurs. And that is where the art of this kind of thing comes in, because it really is an art as much as it is a science, to be able to have the technical knowledge, but also to be able to put yourself in the mind of an evildoer and think, if you're a terrorist, how can I cause the greatest amount of mayhem? What would be the most effective way to do it? What would be the simplest way to do it? So there's not a lot of moving parts. So the plan doesn't fall apart like some elaborate Bond villain. Those there's an art to that, and I think that the state really should have those people on staff to try to figure out, what we're doing, because scanning logins, yep, that's what we got to do, but that's the basic stuff. Imagining how a major attack would unfold. That's the stuff that requires the really talented people who can get into that other mindset and think about wreaking havoc.
Speaking of wreaking havoc, Victoria Seaman has been given a job in the federal government. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Woke up to that news right after we filmed our last podcast. I was like, dang it. But then we get to talk to you about it. Which is interesting because not only did she vacate, I hear randomly over the weekend, vacate her office on the city council, but also vacating her run against Justin Jones for my county commission District F seat. And that now leaves the District F seat wide open. Hearing, Kasama might run, Heidi Kasama from the Nevada Assembly might run. Does that change the calculus for Justin Jones? Like, that's just chaos. So we're going to move to the local lowdown, really talking about like more hyper local stuff. But again, this impacts elections, and it also impacts the city council, which is dealing with some important issues this fall.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, what you heard is absolutely correct. Victoria Seaman vacated her office, cleaned it out over the weekend, showed up on Monday to hand over her badge and her keys and peace out. And turned in her resignation, made it official that morning. And so, like a renter, when the rent is due, you're moving out in the middle of the night. And yeah, she jumped out of that race with Justin Jones, where I think she had a really good chance in that district because of the negative headlines that Jones has faced. I think she was probably favored to win that district. But curiously enough, that is the opponent that Justin Jones wanted. He wanted Victoria Seaman because she was a flawed person. He could say on the city council, she couldn't sell a settlement for a lawsuit for $63 million and instead couldn't get the votes. And so a couple years later, the city council settles the lawsuit for $630 million, 10 times what she had on the table. She couldn't sell a lawsuit 10 times. Now, if you ask Victoria Seaman, and I did, she will say the votes just weren't there. The fellow council members didn't vote her way. And frankly, I think they should have, because, when you started seeing those lawsuit results and those judges' rulings, you had to know beyond a shadow of a doubt, we are going to lose this and lose big. We need to settle this immediately. Victoria Seaman ran for office on that premise that we got to settle this, and did her best, but wasn't able to form the coalitions that are necessary on a city council to get that kind of thing done. So the dynamics of the council, I think, have changed considerably because she and Berkeley were at odds. Shelley Berkeley actually sent a accidental reply all email that to someone that said Victoria does not have any respect on the city council, so words to that effect. And the reply all included Victoria. She was not happy about receiving that. If you've ever been on the receiving end of one of those reply alls and you gain some insight into that, that's kind of an embarrassing thing. As the saying goes, it's a wicked thing to know oneself through the eyes of others. But now I think the Republicans are going to find someone like Heidi Kasama, or I believe it's pronounced Haiti, if I'm pronouncing it the way that she pronounces it, to run in that seat. And I think that is going to give Justin Jones a run for his money. Some people are speculating he's going to get out and he's going to say, okay, I can't win this, I'm going to jump out. He has shown some stick-to-itiveness in the past with problems, and I don't think he's going to just jump out. I think he's going to stay in unless it's absolutely apparent to him that he is not going to win, in which case he could get out. And then that opens it up to a lot of other people.
So, in more chaos, I mean, listen, I will be the first to say I actually adore Justin Jones. I don't say that a lot about politicians, but he's actually been a really good county commissioner. And like, gotten a lot of good stuff done out here. Roads fixed. I can finally somewhat drive on Durango, things like that. But
It's the little things always.
that's not a little thing. That's a big thing. You risk your life every time you go up that street. Anyways, he even in the last race he only won by 300 votes. This is a tricky district. It's a tough district. And it's an ever changing, ever growing district. It has exploded out in the Southwest. That's why many of the districts we talked about earlier, Melanie Scheibel's district, Assembly District 9, which is changing, 35, which I live in, 88, which, Yui Win has. It's ever changing. And so, do we then see somebody like an assembly member Win step in? Do we see somebody like Steve Yeager potentially step in if for some reason, and I hope this doesn't happen, but if Justin gets out of that race, what happens then? Because I've heard Steve Yeager wants to run for 100 different things. I've heard he wants to run for treasurer. I've heard he wants to run for the Supreme Court. I've heard, numerous things he wants to do. Where does that all fall now too?
Yeah, I've heard those same rumors. I've only asked him about a handful of them, but I think what we know is guaranteed is that if Jones gets out, the timing of that performance and the timing of that exit and the entry of the new person has got to be done fairly deftly for that to give the advantage to the Democrats, because as you point out, it's a close district. And there's people are going to come in with a lot of baggage in some cases. In the case of Yui Win, there's not a lot. I mean, he's been in the legislature 2 sessions, not a lot of things to attack him on. Yeager probably more so. But I think either, especially Steve Yeager, I think would make a good county commissioner. The difficulty is, will Jones decide not to do it? And what is the criteria that he would have to look at? Is it polling? Is it, hearing from consultants? Is it hearing from constituents that he trusts? What is the thing there? And remember, the case that he has before the state bar is being appealed to the Nevada Supreme Court. So we're going to see, at the very least, we're going to see a headline. It may be a positive headline for him, but we're going to see another headline that reminds us all of what was going on about this destruction of evidence, which happened to be in a case in which the county spent millions of dollars to settle a case. Now, on the positive side of the ledger, on his behalf, listen, this is this is a situation where he was on the right side of this. Nobody wants the development in Red Rock Canyon, or even close to Red Rock Canyon, which development is close to.
I certainly didn't want that development, right, Steve?
That's right. That's right. And the logistics of doing this development, I mean, you talk about leapfrog development like Coyote Springs or some other fanciful thing like that. This isn't leapfrog development. This is something of an entirely different order. This is talking about pumping water up a hill, an incredible cost. This is talking about finding a route, an easement to get up to this community that is going to be very difficult to do. And I honestly don't know if this will ever actually happen. I think ultimately, this is my prediction. Remember this: if this happens, save this tape. If it doesn't happen, you can delete it. And that is, I think this land will be eventually traded for development land elsewhere by the Rhodes Corporation, whether Jim Rhodes himself or his successor. They'll trade this land for favorable land to develop elsewhere, because this development is just too difficult to do. And the opposition has not gone away. It's not just Justin Jones. There are tons of people who live in Blue Diamond, who live in District F, who live anywhere near this area, who say, no, that should not be developed. We shouldn't have homes on the top of that hill. And so I think that's probably what's going to happen to that. But that's just my prediction, and I've got no specific info to tie that to.
Maria, you're up.
Nevada is in a great spot, and Las Vegas and Clark County. So going now, zooming way out, even away from Nevada, the country, the world, So what the fuck is happening in the world? And spoiler alert for everyone, it's still chaotic and terrible. And we don't know what pictures of Trump are fake or not. At least I can't tell. But while Trump is TBD, Rudy Giuliani in an accident. I want to get your thoughts, Steve, and your thoughts, Annette, on Rudy Giuliani receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Trump says.
Yes, Trump indicates he's going to give the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Well, I think after giving it to Rush Limbaugh, the sort of the luster of that award has probably faded somewhat. But you got to think that this is of a piece with everything else. I mean, Rudy Giuliani did exactly what Trump wanted in the wake of January or the wake of I'm sorry the 2024 election before January 6th. When he basically said, yes, the election is stolen. He went on to make those claims in a number of different court venues to the point where his law license was taken away because he had made material misrepresentations to a court. And as we all know here, especially residents of District F, you cannot make material misrepresentations to a court. And so, but again, the criteria for Trump, I think, in giving out this award is this person a distinguished person? Is it a person of letters? Is it a person who did a heroic act, or is it a person who has given a lifetime of service to the country, like when President Obama gave the medal to Joe Biden? No, the criteria here is, has this person been loyal to me? Is this person, saying and doing the things that I want them to say and do? And Rudy Giuliani fits that to a T. And so, of course, we all hope the mayor recovers from his injuries that sustained in that car crash. It seems like a somewhat serious car crash. But you question, is this, the appropriate type of person who had a stellar career as a prosecutor, as a mayor, and then sort of got sidetracked into all of these conspiracy theories, none of which have ever been proven in a single court anywhere in the country where you had an adversarial proceeding to challenge the idea that the election in 2020 was stolen. Has been laughed right out of court, and has never been any proof of that. Rudy Giuliani claimed falsely that he had proof of that, and I think that is going to be part of his legacy every bit as much as getting the Presidential Medal.
I had not heard that, and it's probably better I hadn't heard that. So that's news for me. But I think overall, and Steve, I know you and I talk a lot about this offline, the free fall at this point towards fascism is alive and spinning every day. And I think it's more probably chaotic than I expected. I don't know why. I mean, I lived through the first Trump presidency, but here we are. And still there are things that still I think are jarring when the norms that we are used to in this country are just being, upheaved. I have people who message me on a daily basis on social media. What's going to happen? Are you afraid? Frankly, I'm not that scared of these people because I think they're dumb. But, people are scared and people are very, very worried, especially our undocumented friends. What do you say about that? Because, you see things. There was a thing this past week where Trump put his big mug up on the side of a building, the Department of Labor, next to Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, if you know anything about Teddy Roosevelt is rolling in his grave having something like that happen, especially somebody like Donald Trump next to him. What do you just think? What do you make of it overall? I mean, the rolling out the red carpet for Putin, who's a war criminal, the normalizing Putin coming on the United States soil and treating Zelensky so poorly. Like, it is chaos constantly. It's got to be a lot covering it on the news too.
Well, yeah, it's very difficult because I was talking about this with some friends of mine today. There are a lot of things that Donald Trump does that are, surprising, controversial, but not illegal. Things that he can do. And so those are a lot of times those are distractions from the things that he is doing that he can't do. For example, he can't by executive order, remove the ability of the states to offer mail-in balloting. That's simply not a presidential power. The president has absolutely no role in that. It is the state legislatures and the Congress that have to do with election laws and rules. And so now he may be saying, I'm going to lead this movement, i.e., I'm going to call Mike Johnson and say, pass a bill. And then I'm going to call John Thune and say, get rid of the legislative filibuster. And that's concerning. But he can't do on his own what he claims to do. He can't, for example, terminate birthright citizenship. That is simply not something that he can do. That is a long established precedent by the Supreme Court. Now, he may express a preference and the Supreme Court may comply with overturning that precedent. We know it's happened before with Roe v. Wade and Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. So that's a possibility. And that's something to be concerned about. And so the things that I try to focus on are the things that he is doing that he is not allowed to do. And I think that the seminal moment came. There's been so many things that Donald Trump has said that people have fixated on. But the one that I fixated on more than anything else is the time that Donald Trump said that, in certain times we may have to terminate rules and laws, including those in our great Constitution. And that is not something an American president has ever said. There are presidents who have stretched the bounds of the Constitution, like Saltwater Taffy, like FDR, for example, but have never said we need to suspend the Constitution. And I think that was the most concerning to me, because we are now seeing him bringing that in and doing some of these things that betray the fact that the Constitution is he sees it as not really an impediment to doing the things he wants to do. As he said himself the other day, I'm the president of the United States. I can do whatever I want to do. Well, no, you can't. In fact, there's a long list of things that you're explicitly allowed to do, and everything that's not on that list is outside of your purview. And many presidents have found those constraints stifling. In fact, probably every president has found those constraints stifling, but they have all obeyed them. They've all obeyed the lawful orders of a court. They've all stuck with, their role and duties as commander in chief of the military. Trump, I think, is increasingly, departing from those kind of things, and I think it is concerning. And the treating what would be traditionally an American ally in Ukraine, people that have been invaded, starting in 2014 under Barack Obama with the invasion of Crimea, all the way to where we are now, where Russian drones to this day, perhaps even as we speak, are attacking and killing civilian targets in Ukraine. That would normally be an American ally. We would stand up to the Soviet Union of old and the kleptocratic Russia of today by saying, no, you are not going to take this territory. Here are the terms of our peace deal. You withdraw to the borders of Ukraine before it was invaded, not in more recently, but in 2014. Crimea and everything else belongs to Ukraine. You get out, and then we'll have peace. But we're not hearing that. We're hearing, well, we have to have some territorial demand. We have to have some territorial concession. So I think those are the things that are really concerning.
It's a lot. We covered a lot today. What did we miss, Steve? Any hot takes from you? Anything that's been on your mind that you want to get off your chest?
Well, there was a story in the New York Times that talked about the loss of Democratic voting registration nationwide. There are 30 states in the United States that allow you to register by party. Nevada, of course, famously is one of them. And according to the New York Times, the Democrats lost voters and the Republicans gained voters across the country. I think all told, Democrats lost about 2.1 million registered voters between the 2020 and 2024 elections in the 30 states, along with Washington, D.C. Republicans gained 2.4 million. They went from a nearly percentage point edge over Republicans on Election Day 2020 to just over 6 percentage point edge in 2024. And here in Nevada, of course, we have seen Republicans out-register Democrats. That's something we haven't seen. I looked that up today until 2007, I believe, was the last time that happened. And that was when the Harry Reid machine was really kicking into high gear, and the Democrats outraised Republicans and had them beat, in some cases by more than 100,000 voters statewide, to now Democrats being behind Republicans by just a handful. I think they've recovered that advantage, but we're talking neck and neck. It's a 50-50 split between those, with nonpartisans, of course, being the largest voting bloc. Some of those being automatically registered, and some, of course, being disgusted with both parties and saying, I've had enough and I'm going to register, in the hopes that I won't get any more political mail, not realizing, of course, as any political insider would tell you, if you register
They get
nonpartisan,
the most.
you will get more mail than you've ever gotten before, because both sides are trying to persuade you to come over to their side. So that is not a good way to keep your mailbox empty come election time. So I've just been, considering that and seeing the big swing here in the state of Nevada, which is one of the biggest swings that the Times identified nationally as something. So that's something I've
Do
been
you think
thinking about.
part of that also, though, is because of the implementation of automatic voter registration, which obviously has happened over the past really 2 cycles for the most part? And, obviously, for those who don't know what that means, when people go to the DMV, and actually now when they go to Medicaid offices as of 2026, you're automatically enrolled in and registered as a voter, but you're registered nonpartisan because obviously if you just get it done automatically, they don't know what party to register you as. And then you can go back and actually change that. Do you think that's playing a part in some of this, Steve?
Yeah, I think the explosive growth in nonpartisan registration is in large part because of that. But I will say this: I've looked at the trend up until 2020. And the trend up until 2020 showed both Democrats and Republicans losing voters and nonpartisan registration on the increase. So even before automatic voter registration became a thing, Democrats and Republicans collectively were losing voters. And so now I'm curious as to, we saw in the 2024 election that millions of people who had voted for Joe Biden just 4 years before did not come out to vote at all for Kamala Harris or voted for Donald Trump. And I've always that's a big swing. Joe Biden to Donald Trump is a big swing. And so I wonder if there were a lot of people who just threw up their hands and said, forget it. I'm not going to participate. I don't like my choice, and I'm not going to dignify this process with a vote. I think there might have been some of that. And again, Annette, you alluded earlier in our talk back to 2014. And I think that's a lot of that happened in 2014, especially on the part of organized labor, when they said, listen, you know what? We're not, Democrats haven't really helped us much. And so we're not going to help you guys much. And by the time they realized that Stephen Horsford was in jeopardy of losing to Crescent Hardy in the 4th Congressional District, it was too late to turn things around. So Crescent Hardy
I mean,
became
in
the
that race, we
target.
lost Justin in the state Senate. We lost control of both the legislative houses. That's when we saw Michelle Fiore and Victoria Seaman go into the assembly, which
And
was
and the despair was so great that the Democratic nominee for governor lost to none of these candidates in the primary in 2014. It was Bob Goodman, the late Bob
oh,
Goodman,
poor Bob.
former tourism director, I believe, in the administration of the late great Governor Mike O'Callahan. So and it was a sacrificial lamb, and everybody knew it because he was running against Brian Sandoval, one of the most popular governors in state history, who is reviled by Republicans as a rhino, and yet was probably their most effective standard bearer. And if he ran
100%.
today for the United States Senate, would be an immediate favorite. If he ran today for vice president or of the United States, or even president of the United States, I think would be a very viable candidate nationwide. Of course, he's too smart to
I was gonna say he's too normal.
let anybody talk him into that. Although he might accept an appointment to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's probably the only other job he wants other than the president of UNR, which is what he has now.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve, for joining us for all
Well,
your
good.
hot takes and thoughts. You were one of our biggest fans that just kept asking us if we were bringing this back over the
Yes.
summer when we took our little break. So thank you for being a fan of the show and supporting our work. We appreciate you always coming on and talking to us, and we hope you'll continue to join us as we go through the fall.
Absolutely, anytime. And everybody listening, like, comment, and subscribe to 1 Minute Recess. Great podcast and very fun to be on. So thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. All right, Maria, take us out.
Well, that's the final bell. It's time for us to strike the gavel here and get on out and try to tune out of all of the things we talked about. So everyone follow Steve Sebelius' advice, like, comment, review if you're on wherever you get your podcasts, and we will see you next week. And if you have anything you would like to see or hear on the show, links in our bio to contact us. Let us know who you'd like to see, what you want to hear about, what you want to learn about. So
and make sure
we'll
you're
see you next week.
watching Steve on Channel 13
Yes.
in Las Vegas. Our friend Steve on all the time, educating the masses.
Doing my best.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. Happy Labor Day, belated Labor Day when you're watching this. Thank you all to all the workers out there who keep Nevada running. And we will see you next week. Have a great week, everyone.